In today's video, we're going to build a SaaS app that can generate photos using AI. Hey everyone, it's Kyle from Gravity here. Today we're going to be building a SaaS app that can generate photographs using AI. It's going to have everything from authentication to payments, and we're going to build this using my SaaS Boilerplate. So here's a quick demo of what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a web application where users can sign up and then enter a prompt to generate photographs using OpenAI's Dall-E. They can save these images to their gallery and come back and view them at any time. This is just one example of a product you can build using a SaaS Boilerplate. Your imagination is the limit here. You can build absolutely anything you want using one of these types of products. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up below. If you've got any questions, drop a comment down in the comment section. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the tutorial. So as I mentioned in the introduction, for this tutorial, we're going to be using my SaaS Boilerplate. This is going to give us everything from the authentication, billing, and payments to the user interface components that we're going to use to construct this app at warp speed. If you haven't got a copy of this boilerplate, but you're interested in getting it, you can get it from usegravity.app. I'll put a link down in the description below. So once you've downloaded the boilerplate, you should have a couple of different folders. You're going to have a server folder. You're going to have a client folder depending on whether you've got the web version or the native version. You also have a folder called Mission Control, which is an admin app for managing your whole SaaS application, but we're not going to talk about that today. When you go into the folder, I'm going to go into the server folder, and then I'm going to run npm run setup, and then this is going to go through various different checks, install all the packages that we need, and it'll probably take a few minutes to complete this, so I'm going to skip the video on here. Okay, so our application is now up and running. The boilerplate's installed. We've got all the packages installed, and we're ready to set up our app. So you can see that it's already opened up the boilerplate in the browser here at the sign-in window, but I'm going to change this to the setup window. So let's go to the setup URL. So let's go here, zoom in a bit, and then we have a little setup wizard that will take you through the steps of configuring your application. So the first thing you want to do is set up your database. So you're going to put in your host, user, password, port, database name. I'm not going to type these credentials in on the video, but this should hopefully be fairly self-explanatory. Then we want to go into the Stripe section. You're going to put in your Stripe publishable key and your Stripe test key, and what this will do will be pull in all of the plans from your Stripe account. You can also hit this little checkbox here if you want to include a free plan to allow users to sign up without having to actually select a payment plan and enter the card details. Go to the Mailgun section, and here we can put in our Mailgun API key, our mail domain, and our sender address. You can use other mail providers. Mailgun is the default, but because Gravity uses Node Mailer, you can basically use a wide array of mail services for this. Then we go into the domain section. We put in a domain for our app. I'm going to call mine aigraphics.io, which is actually the domain of a failed AI graphics product that I made last year. We put in the support email address, and then we have the authentication window where you can put in your Facebook app ID, Twitter app ID, and app secret if you want to let your users sign in with Facebook or Twitter. And then we go to finish, and we're just going to be told to restart the server so that all of those changes take effect. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll show you the output of what's just happened in this step. So I've restarted my server, and I've opened up my database client here, so you can see that Gravity has created a bunch of tables for us. We've got everything from storing our accounts, email templates, invites, user tables. This is all performed as part of the setup. So there's one final thing we need to do here. Because we're going to be using OpenAI to generate the images with Dall-E, we need to add our OpenAI key to Gravity. So I'm going to jump over to the code here. We've got two folders here. We have the server folder where all the server-side node code, and then we have the client folder, which is the React client and user interface. Inside the server folder, we have a .env file, and this is where we store our sensitive information, such as our API keys. So there is already a variable defined for this that comes included with Gravity here. So you will want to put in your OpenAI key in here so that we can use that later to connect to the OpenAI API. Okay, so now I'm going to jump back over to the browser where we can create our first user account. So now we've got the database set up. We can go ahead. I'm going to put in my name, my email, and then I'm going to put in my password. And then I'm going to hit create account, and this will create our first user account. Boom, we're in. Next thing we need to do is select a plan. So this will already create our free account that we specified during setup, and then we've pulled in our Stripe account, which is our $10 a month one. So let's go ahead and we'll use the Stripe test card number, and we'll subscribe to a payment plan. There we go, we're in. We've got an onboarding screen here, so we'll just go ahead and skip that, and that will take us straight into the main boilerplate application. We've got a dashboard here. If we go into account, we've got various different sections in our account. We can update our profile information, we can go into billing, we can change our plan, we can update our card details, we can download invoices, we can go in, we can invite more users if we want. So all of the kind of boring functionality of building a SaaS product is now set up, and we've achieved this in just a few minutes by using a boilerplate. So this now gives us the perfect foundation to go ahead and start building our AI features on top of this. So what I want to do next is create a new view in our client. We also want to create a new database table, a new set of API endpoints in order to start interacting with our AI functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my terminal window, and then what I'm going to do is create all of this stuff using one command line function. So we're going to do gravity create, and let's call this image. And I'm going to use the UI flag because I want to instruct Gravity to create a new user interface. We're going to use the DB flag to tell it to create a new database migration for this table. So I'm going to run that. And there we go. That's finished. So let's take a look at what's just happened. We're going to go back to the code. If we go into our API folder here, you can see we have a new set of API endpoints automatically created, which we can now use to create, update, get, or delete an image. It's also created a new controller function for us to handle these API endpoints. And it's also created a new model file here so that we can actually interact with the database table that we're going to create shortly to store all of the image data. If we jump into our client then, we go into source views, we can see that it's created a new template image view here. This is where we're going to populate our user interface to generate the photos with AI. It will also have created a new root inside our app folder here. So we've imported the image from here, and then we've created the new root. So if we jump back into our browser and we go here and we type in image, you can see we've got this new blank UI view. We've got this error message because that view is actually trying to select the images from the table, but we haven't yet run the database migration. So we're going to do that in a minute, but we can just ignore that for now. One thing I want to do though is change the name of this root in the app. On the back end, we do want to call this image because it's going to be what our images are called, but I think on the client, it looks a bit strange. We want to call this portfolio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the code, and then we're going to change the root to portfolio. We're going to get our image component. We're going to call this portfolio. So our export portfolio. And then in our root, we can call this portfolio. And we will need to change the import up here from views image to views portfolio. And then let's just call the title portfolio. We also need to rename this file to portfolio. Okay, let's jump back to the browser. Okay, so our root no longer works. So let's go ahead and rename that portfolio. Still going to get this error message, just ignore it. So we've now got our portfolio view set up. One final thing I want to do is just add a nav option in here for this view. So we can do this by going into the components folder, and then layout, app, and then inside the app layout, you can see we've got our navigation element here, which is another component. So let's just add a new nav item. We'll call it portfolio. Icon is going to be image, and this is going to go to the portfolio view. So let's go ahead and look. There we go. We've got our new nav and UI view scaffolded and set up and ready to go. So what we want to do next is we want to fix that error message, because we haven't actually created we've created the migration file for the database, but we haven't run it and actually created the table in the database. So let's bounce back to the code, close these down, and then inside the server folder, I'm gonna look for migrations and then image. So we've got our boilerplate database image migration created here. So this is going to give us an ID, a name, timestamps of when the image was created or updated, and then we've got an account ID column, which is going to tie this image, which is going to relate every image to the account that we've signed up as. So what I actually want to do is we want to change this. So we want to change name to prompt, because we want to store the prompt that we use to generate the photo. So in case we want to generate something similar in the future, we can actually go and see the prompt that we used to create that photo. And then I want to create another column called URL. So let's change this to URL. And this is, we're going to store the URL of the image to display it in the app. Awesome. Let's jump back into terminal. And then what we can do here is we can do connects migrate latest, and then that will run our migration. Awesome. So if we go back into our database, let's refresh that. There we go. We can see our database table is now created. And if we jump back to the browser and we refresh this page, we should no longer see the error message, because what is happening is that view is making a call to our API endpoint. So it's calling our API image endpoint, which was created as part of when we ran the command line tool. And then that's going to go and basically call the controller file, call the model file, get the data from the database and send it back. Obviously we haven't created any images yet, so this view is just blank for now. If you're enjoying this video, if you're finding it useful, please hit the like button below. Please subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. If you have any questions about anything I've just said, please put a comment down below. I respond to all of the comments, so please don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, so the next thing we want to do then is to populate our UI view here. So let's go into our code and take a look. So the first thing we want to do here is create a modal pop-up where the user can enter a prompt and tell Dall-E what it is that they want to create in their photograph. So I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to import use context from React, because we're going to use a gravity view context, which actually has a modal component built in for us, so we can show a modal pop-up very easily. So let's do that. Let's then import the view context from the gravity components library here. There's a whole bunch of different components included with gravity, and we can just import them anywhere in our application and use them to speed up our workflow. So let's go in here. I like to put comments here just to make everything clear. So we'll do context and state, and we'll do const view context equals use context, and then we'll pass in our view context, and then that will give us access to the modal function, which we'll see in a second. So I've got that. Let's change this to images. Set images. We're not going to use this till later, but we'll use this state object to store the images. And then let's just comment this out for now because we don't need it yet. And then what I want to do is create a function called create image. So, and then we can do view context modal.show, and then inside this we can pass some parameters for our modal. So we can do title, create a new photo, and then we want URL. So this is going to go to API AI image. The Gravity actually has these endpoints already included for you because there is already an OpenAI integration included. So we have the endpoints to already interact with ChatGPT, and Dall-E is already included out of the box. So let's do our URL, and then our method is going to be post, and then we want a form. So this is going to render a form component inside of our modal. And then inside this, we want an input called prompt. And then we want this to be type text area, required true, label prompt, placeholder, let's say describe the image you want to create, and then we'll do value. So normally you wouldn't hard code the value, but because we're going to be testing this a few times, I don't want to keep typing in the prompt, so we can just set the value. Let's say a realistic photograph of a cat eating ice cream, and let's say cinematic 4K. Okay, so we've got our input, and then we want another input because we're going to send these two values to the server. We want the size of the image, but let's just fix this. So we'll say type hidden, and we'll do value is 512 pixels by 512 pixels. Okay, and then finally we just need to tell the model what we want our button text to be. So let's say create. So we've got a function here called create image, which is then going to show a new modal and ask the user to type in a prompt for what we're going to send to Dall-E to create the image. So the next thing we need to do here is then create a button to trigger this function. So I'm going to import two more components here. Going to import title row, which is just basically like a subtitle row. I'll show you in a second once we set it up. And then I'm going to import the button component. And then what we can do in here is we can say, okay, in our title row, we want our title to be your images. And then we can do button text, new photo action is going to be our create image function. So let's go ahead and save that. And then we can jump back into our code. So this is our title row. It's basically just a subtitle on the left and then a button on the right. And when we click this, we've got our pop-up appearing here with our prompt in there that we can then send to the server, and then we can send that to Dall-E to create the image. So let's go ahead and do that next. So cancel the modal. I'm gonna go back into our code. This time we want to go into our server. So inside our controller, because we're hitting this endpoint here to create a new image, this is going to be handled by AI controller image. So let me jump back into my controller here, open up the AI controller, and we have these handlers here. We also have the model for OpenAI included, so you can interact with ChatGPT and you can interact with Dall-E out of the box. So AI controller. So let's go into our image here. What we want to do is just log out the response here so I can show you that everything is working, or we can test that everything is working. So this should now in fact send the request to Dall-E. So let me hit create, and then we'll jump back to the terminal, contacting the singularity. So the request is working, and then there we go. Got our response back with the image here. So let's copy that. And then we'll open that in the browser. We should see our cat eating ice cream. Amazing, there we go. Okay, so everything is working as it should. What we actually want to do next then is save this image in the database. We've got our photo generation working, but we can't actually see it yet. We can't see any of our previous images. So what we want to do is save these images, and then we can see like a nice portfolio grid here of all the images we've generated. So let's go back into our AI controller. We remember when we scaffolded our image, we created a model for it. So we have create, get, update, and delete already created. So we can just import this model into our AI controller. So we can do require model image, and then that will import our image. And then what we want to do then is just save that in here. So I'm going to change this let image data so we can overwrite this variable. Then we're going to do image data equals await image create, and then here we're going to do data is going to be, we're going to pass in prompt, and that's going to be data prompt, because the prompt is coming from we're getting the request object here. We're putting it into the request body, which is basically what's being sent from the client. It's put into this data variable, so we can access that here. We want to save the prompt, and then we want to save the URL that we got back from Dall-E here. So that's going to be image data, because it's an array, it's going to be 0 URL. And then what we want to do is specify the account, so rec account. Basically what is happening here is if we look at our image model, when we create a new image, it's going to generate a unique ID for it using UUID. And then we also want to save the account ID that this image belongs to. So when we're selecting images later, if you look at our get thing, we're only going to select images that belong to this account. So we can either select all of the images for the account, or we can select an image by ID. But even when we select by ID, we also want to specify the account to make sure that there's no possibility for any data bleed where we select images from other accounts. So when we pass in the account to this create function, it's going to add that into the database column. So we've got that in our rec account. So basically what is happening in Gravity is every time we call an endpoint like this and we have this middleware, so verify user, that checks, that's basically an authentication check, and then it will inject the user ID and the account ID into the rec object. So whenever we access the rec object in the controller, we have access to the user ID and the account ID in any request, which means we can inject them very easily into the database. So this will create our new image, it'll save it in the database, and then our image model is going to pass back the data that it saved, including the ID and the account ID. It's going to be passed back to our controller here, and then we're going to send that back to the client, and then the client can access the URL and display the image. So let's go ahead and test this with a new image. So let's create a new cat, create, and then we're going to go back to terminal. I'm just going to wait until this has finished, and then we can check our database to see. There we go. So let's check our database now, and that image should now be saved. There we go. We've got our prompt, we've got our URL, and then we've got our created at, updated at, and we've got our account ID saved. So the final thing we need to do then is show these images in the user interface here, because this view doesn't look very exciting at the minute. So let's jump back into our portfolio view here, and we need we need to get use effect from React. And we need to get another few components from Gravity here. So this time we're going to get our grid and the image component so we can display the images in a nice grid. We're also going to get the blank slate message. So we don't have any images, then we can show this blank slate. We're getting our loader in as well, so we can display a little loading animation as the data is loading. So let's go ahead then and we're going to fetch our data. So fetch, and then we're going to call this, let's rename this fetch. So we're going to fetch all of the images for the account. And then what we want to do is put this into state. So let's use effect, and then we'll do fetch dot data. So in fetch, basically this is a hook. Use API is a hook that's included with Gravity. It will call that API endpoint. It will manage the loading state, and then it will return the data whenever it's got it from the server. So what I want to do is if fetch data dot length. So if there is data, we can do set images, and then we can do fetch data. So we're just going to get the array of images from the server, and then we'll put it into our state object here. Okay, so then we've got our create image function. What we want to do here is if fetch dot loading, we just want to return the loader. So we don't actually want to display this yet while the view is loading. So let's go ahead and refresh that. There we see, you can see our loader loaded very quickly there, and then we got the data from the database. So what we want to do now is modify this view to render our images. So what we want to do is, if we want to have two different states here, we want to have, if there's images in our array, we're going to have a fragment. So if there's images, we want to display our title row, and we want to display a grid in here. If we don't have images, we want to show our blank slate message. So for this, we're going to do title. We're going to do title equals no photos yet. And then we'll do text. Would you like to create a photo now? And then we'll have button text, create photo, and then action is going to be our same create image function, which will show the modal. So we've got two states here. So if we've got images, I know that should be, if we've got images, we're going to show the title row, and we're going to put a grid in here in a second. If not, we're going to show the blank slate. So let's refresh. Oh, got an error. Blank slate message is not defined. Oh, typo, boom. So because we've already got images, we're going to see this header row. But if we go back and delete that image, then you can see we've got this nice blank slate message here. We can prompt the user to take action. So let's go ahead and create another photo. What we need to do in a second is push that new photo into state. So now we can go ahead and we can add in our grid. So let's do grid calls equals, let's say 4 columns. So we're just importing the grid component from Gravity, and then we're going to map our images. And we're going to do return, and we're going to use the image component, give it a key, so it's going to be image.id, and then the source is going to be image.url, and then that should show us the so we've got images, we're going to map them on the view. So there we go, there's our one image that we've got there. The final thing we need to do then is when we create a new image, we want to push that image into this state so that it shows up immediately. So we can do that very easily by going into our create image function. And what we can do is we can use the callback function of the Gravity modal to do this. Our callback function is going to pass back the data that was input into the form and also the response from the server. So then all we need to do is set images, take our previous state, and then we're going to use that, and then we're going to take the response from the server and combine those two things together. So fingers crossed, we create a new image. Just refresh to be sure. Create a new image. That's going to generate the image on the server, send it back to the client, and then we should see it appear in our grid. Boom, done. There is our AI app up and working. Let's just try it again once more to make sure everything's working. Awesome. Bit weird, the last one, but now you can sit all day and generate photos of cats eating ice cream or anything else you want. You know, we can now just change this prompt. A realistic photo of a dog riding a motorcycle. Let's just go ahead and make that. That's it for today. If you would like to see more content like this, please subscribe. I also have a 25-hour video course on how to build a SaaS product from scratch. I'll put a link down in the description below and a coupon you can use to get that if you're interested. Awesome. I will see you next time.